Perfect. Welcome, everyone. And I said it, and as soon as I said it, my intro is gone too now. Perfect. Welcome. I'm Yvonne Schwab, ACG Silicon Valley CEO. I'm excited to have you join us today for our event, Growth or Death, Your Choice. For those of you new to ACG Silicon Valley, we are the leading business-to-business association in Silicon Valley, providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth. We are part of a worldwide organization, ACG, offering an array of networking opportunities with 13,000 members in 59 chapters across the world. Our chapter is offering a variety of events in the coming months. We invite you to visit our website at acgsv.org to see the full calendar. On Thursday, we have our Female Executive Leaders Circle, a fireside chat with Bina Amanath, Executive Director at the Global Deloitte AI Institute. Next week, we have a panel discussion on ethical supply chain management. And on September 29th, Dell is hosting an event on cyber resiliency. We also have our next ACG California chapter e-lunch coming up, which ACGSV is hosting this time. And let's not forget one of our most attended events, the round robin with our San Francisco sister chapter. These are always fun and so desperately needed for networking during these challenging times. Now, I would like to introduce you to our moderator today, Philippe Bouzou, Managing Partner at Blue Dot Partners. He is a growth expert, speaker, best-selling author of the book Aligning the Dots. Philippe is also a venture capitalist, CEO, entrepreneur, and has been in Silicon Valley for 31 years, where he has helped grow and run several businesses. He has served on 20 boards, and I'm sure he'll tell us a little bit more about himself as well. So now, without further ado, Philippe.
Well, Yvonne, thank you so much for your kind introduction. I am looking forward to this exciting panel on a topic that's dear and near to my heart, which is growth, top-line revenue growth. Nicolas Stelle was supposed to be on our panel, but unfortunately, he had a last-minute trip. He had to go to Europe. He's working on a big deal, and he has a dinner actually right now, so he apologizes and couldn't be with us today. I'm going to quickly introduce Melissa and Tim, our panelists, and then we'll dive right into it. So Melissa Wong is the CEO and the co-founder of Retail Zipline. She's a retail veteran, a consumer technology expert, having spent over 10 years focusing on retail communications at Old Navy. During her time there, in one of the largest retailers of Old Navy in North America, she focused on improving the way the company communicated with the field, ultimately improving store execution and driving sales. She now serves as the founder and CEO of Zipline, a leading retail communication and store execution solution loved by tens of thousands of users. And Tim Aids has over 27 years of leadership experience in sales, marketing, and executive management at the CEO level. Tim has a very deep expertise in driving high growth for computing, security, and enterprise software companies. Tim joined vArmor as the CEO in October 2013, and prior to that, he was the CEO at Silvertail Systems from March 2010 until the company was acquired by RSA, which is the security division of EMC, and that was in the late 2012. Prior to leading Silvertail Systems, Tim was the CEO of Everyone.net, which was a SMB-focused SaaS company that was then acquired by Proofpoint. Tim has also held sales and executive leadership position at BES Systems, Sana Security, Phoenix Technology, and IBM. Tim and Melissa, welcome to the panel. And if we could start by having you describe, quickly what your company does.
Over to you, Melissa.
All right. So
Thanks for such a kind introduction. So Philippe, like you had mentioned, so I'm the founder and CEO of Zipline, and we're the operational platform that powers over 70 of the world's best retailers like Nike, Lululemon, Gap Inc., Casper, Warby Parker. We're the operational platform that powers all of their stores. So anything a store needs to do, whether it's putting up marketing, talking about COVID protocol, et cetera, we're that one-stop shop so that teams can really understand what the brand is asking them to do and to be able to do that. The problem that we're solving is that only on the industry average for stores doing something that they're being asked is only about 29%. So that's 29% of your stores if you have 29 stores if you have 100. And that's been slowing down a lot of innovation and growth in retail to date. But we're beginning to see a fast pickup as well around retailers needing to be more agile. So that's us.
Good. And your company is based here in Silicon Valley.
That's correct.
All right. Tim?
Sure. My name is Tim Eads. I'm the CEO of Yvonne. We do application relationship management. We think as things move to cloud, they get more dynamic and relationships become important. So we sell into banks and regulated industries. I've been in cyber a long time, and I've learned that people only buy security software when there's a regulation and telling them they actually really have to. People use our software for a large amounts of reasons, but primarily application dependency and relationship mapping, so they can see how things are connected. So if things break, you understand resiliency and operational risk, locking down and controlling those flows through what they would call orchestrated segmentation, and then also looking at identity of things. So actually truly understanding who actually is accessing an application, not who should do or who ought to, who actually is. So that's what we do. We have customers and people all around the world, literally from Munich to, I don't know, Malaysia to Singapore to Calgary to all over the place. And the majority of which have been hired during the pandemic.
That's great. And again, your company is based here in Silicon Valley as well.
Yeah, headquarters is in Los Altos.
Good. So I am wondering how much is growing your top line revenue a priority for you both? And how much is it a priority for your investors? And is there a difference?
All right, Melissa, you go.
I like to say like growing, I mean, the way that we see it. So we are a very intent based solution, right? And so for us, we have like almost zero churn since we first started years ago. And for us, we see revenue growth as a function of, as a result, right? As a result of making the right decisions for our users and for our brands and for us meeting the needs in the market. So in that way, I see that revenue growth, it is incredibly important to us, but we focus on it. It's more like an output of how we're growing the business versus just focusing on that one top line revenue number. So we look at adoption, we look at effectiveness and easy to use. We make sure that our customer happiness and NPS scores are as high. And as a result of that, the word of mouth has gotten out in the market about how effective we are, what great partners we are, and that has driven our revenue growth and long-term contracts. So so that kind of answers the question about, how we look at revenue. And from an investor perspective, we have had very great investors, so Emergence, Fifth Wall, and I think they're around the same philosophy that we're building a great company by providing a product that is incredibly effective in the market, and from that will come long-term high revenue growth.
So the way, if I understand correctly, growth is a kind of a measurement of success being defined by making the right decision and doing the right things.
Yeah, and for a customer, we're incredibly customer centric.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's probably not the most popular sentiment in Silicon Valley, but I mean, by focusing on our users and focusing on their success in stores and headquarters, and in the brands trying to navigate through like an unprecedented time, our success in making them successful at every user level is what's driving our revenue growth, because we're able to help them achieve their goals. And we have pilots, for example, we have pilots as part of our sales process, and we've had 100% pilot conversion. So that kind of shows you how the success ties into the revenue metrics.
Okay, that makes sense. Tim, what are your thoughts on
Yeah,
this?
I think I am with Melissa on that. Our customers, sorry, our investors are aligned with the management team on what we declare as success and growth. Growth is, absolutely critical for our investors and the management team, but also predictability of that growth. We sell to large enterprises, but we land and we grow, and so our metrics are very much, growth, predictable growth, and kind of net retention. And so we measure everything on those kind of categories, and our finance team, our operational team, the management team, and the board are all aligned on the same metrics, and we have our plan for the year, and it's roughly that direction, and you kind of live within it. But yeah, it's, to us, it's about growth. Predictable growth really is key. And then, looking at that from a net retention model, which is, obviously in the enterprise world, our model really look at customer engagement and customer adoption of new products that we're bringing to market.
Right. So you have two components to that growth. Or one is, landing new logos, closing new customers, and the second one is expansion within your existing accounts.
Right.
And do you have very different programs depending on whether you're hunting or farming?
Very different programs indeed. Yeah, I mean, we're steering the company very heavily towards, the product growth is obviously steered by the sales team and the compensation structures that supports that, but primarily out of the product. We try and steer, product growth as an organic value first that can be encouraged by customer success and the sales team, but primarily it's a product feature, it's a product capability, the product value that you want to engage in, you want to try new capabilities, and you got to try and automate the provisioning and everything else around that. As even if I was in a B2C model, when I used to run an SMB company, everything was organic because you couldn't afford anybody to pick up a phone. Even in the enterprise model, I think CrowdStrike's put on a clinic on how to do that.
Yeah. And you talked a bit about predictability of growth. I assume, tell me if I'm wrong, that the farming or the expansion of existing accounts is probably a little bit easier to predict than the hunting, which is, closing new logos. Is that
true? Yeah, for sure, because of the you're not talking with contracts in the same way.
Right.
If the contract is written correctly, it's a very easy organic structure. Yeah.
So in your experience, Melissa, what have you found to be the critical things that the company must get right in order to grow faster than its market?
Yeah. So there are three things. Actually, I would like to kind of add on to the earlier discussion points though. I think when you look at your user base, right, and you look at net retention, for us, net retention isn't actually user seats. It's actually, because we support 100% of our brand stores, it's actually buying another product.
Yeah.
So Tim, I'm not sure if that's similar to
you. Very, very, very similar to us. Very similar.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think, you probably as well, we know our customers' journey. For us, the digitization journey that our brands will take. So in terms of predictability, it's much easier to predict what products will upsell because the characteristics of the brands that you serve. We have very obviously large brands, right? Like Rite Aid or Riley. So they're mammoth brands. And so we understand it's not like the SMB model. We have we have the ability to understand where they are on their journey versus just from a pure data perspective. Right. And in that way, you have better predictability to say these brands with these characteristics, well, this is next in their digitization journey. We're going to be upselling these two things, right? Or maybe they're not at the right stage. And so it probably will be 1 to 2 years before they get to the next level. So I think, it's interesting when you think about net retention, and especially if it's new products versus seats, it's like, where are your buyers in their journey? And how many of those do you have, and what more can they add on? So I think, I think that's interesting for those of people that are thinking more about a product upsell than a user seat net retention number.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So you were asking about the critical things that we must get right in terms of
if you want to go faster than your market. Yes.
Yeah. I guess I think I see three things, right? So one obviously is product market fit with technology. Like, are you actually delivering the value that you're saying you're delivering? Is your messaging resonating? Because sometimes we have seen moments where sometimes the product does a particular thing, but the messaging's a little bit off. So there's a disconnect. But if you are able to clearly articulate the value, why it's relevant today, target the buyer persona effectively, and the product works, you're staying ahead of the curve. I think the last one to me too, though, in terms of being maniacally focused, is just adoption, right? And for me, the reason why that's so important is our users are tens of thousands of retail employees in stores, right? And so if those users don't actually want to use the technology, if they don't feel like using us is like a breath of fresh air, then it almost doesn't matter what features or functionality we put into it, right? Going back to that net retention and to the upsell, right? A lot of times the user saying like, we need this to do our jobs better. And so I think one of the best quotes that I've heard is actually from Doug Landis of Emergence, who talks about adoption as the new ROI, right? If you can't get people to use the technology, you might have a short-term growth, but in terms of long-term growth and predictability and continuing the strength of the company, if you don't have adoption, like almost nothing else matters.
Right. Yeah. What about your team? What do you think those critical things are?
No, I agree with Melissa. I mean, to me, it all starts with the product. It lives and dies with the product. If your product isn't simple and intuitive and engaging, it really doesn't even get out of the gate. So to me, the big thing is really understand the product. I mean, we spent tens of millions of dollars trying to make our product simple to use. Because you can't scale a company if you don't understand how to address the market. And our market is so gigantic that we have a church in Minnesota that uses it. And yet we run the water authority of a whole large country and a power grid of another one. And depending, I can't say the customer name, but certain places of our software breaks, you can't buy or use a phone. So,
right.
But nevertheless, I've got a church using it who download it off the web because you can install it in 15 minutes. So I think it all starts with product, but I think we have to make sure what we mean by product. It's simple, it's intuitive, but it's also going to scale, right? So there's a lot, when people say product, you've got to unpack it all the way through to the engagement model on it. And the only other thing I would add on in addition to product, which I do think is important, particularly, we have a unique capability, I think, in Silicon Valley, is get peripheral vision. My brothers live in England, and their ability to understand the dynamics of Microsoft or Symantec or Cisco or VMware is a lot distanced. And so I don't think you can build an enterprise software company these days without understanding Seattle and understanding their market forces. So your peripheral vision, you can have the greatest product that a church in Minnesota can use, but if it's going to get wiped out by somebody else, and I think investing in networking, investing in relationships, is absolutely key, but do it deliberately and do it in a way that it's two-way, but do it in a way that you can really learn about the peripheral vision that adds to your market context.
Right. So I understand the context of all those big incumbents and players so that you know how to dance with those elephants.
Yeah, for sure.
So conversely, what are the fatal mistakes that a company must avoid if he wants to grow faster than its market? And that would not be the opposite of what you said. Obviously, it would be things like like they must avoid, as opposed to not doing the right things.
Melissa, you want to take that, or should I?
Why don't you go first?
All right. So
I picked it.
I will talk from personal experience. I think sometimes you think you have product market fit and you don't really know it. And sometimes you think you understand the context. Sometimes you have a VC that says, hey, you're in the biggest market around. Let's go put in one particular opportunity I was involved in, $45 million at a crazy high valuation. And you let the emotional side get away from the logical side of your brain. It's almost like that book, The Chimp Paradox. You get kind of a little bit carried away and you're not controlling it. So I think I've overspent certain times in certain companies at the wrong time, and misconfigured the company on how many customers, how many support people, or sales engineers, the salespeople. The misconfigurations of companies cost you a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And believing that you have product market fit. And I think one of the things I see all the time is on some of the investment stuff that I do is people think they have product market fit after they have 5 customers or 10 customers or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's like, they get too carried away too quick. I've got 10 customers that use it in a consistent way. That's not enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So Tim, I want to double click on this because I hear this term product market fit all the time, as I'm sure you both do as well. I was with Andreessen Horowitz not too long ago, and I was asking them what it is. And the partner was saying, well, it's when people start to buy your product and it's, it's a pull versus you having to push your product. And I was thinking, well, to me, that's the definition of success. I mean, that's where you want to be. What is your definition of product market fit? How do you define it and how do you measure it?
Why do you want me to take that or Melissa to take that?
I'm going to have you take that one.
Well, since you introduced the term, Tim, I think you have to try to answer that question.
Well, let me say, it's something that people quickly judge and quickly claim, and more often than not get it wrong. So what do I think it is? I think it's where a customers understand their product, but not by talking to you, by engaging with other vehicles to understand your messaging, your positioning, your consumption of the product, the engagement of the product, and the viral capability of its value. And by seeing the viral capability of its value and doing all that without you necessarily seeing it. And my last company, we just flew. We went 1 for 24 million in revenue, and the year we went 24, like we didn't need to tell anybody what we did. We walked into the room that everybody knew. Our job was to create why us, and that was market maturity as much as anything else. But yeah, to me, it's about where people can understand and gain and engage with your product, see viral value, consume it, buy it, enjoy it, love it, share it, without talking to you.
So it's really an end-to-end frictionless experience from discovery to trying to downloading to testing to embracing to supporting to paying, right? I mean, that's what you're saying. It
also talks to market maturity, right? I mean, you can, my friend was in a voice over IP startup in like 98, and that was a waste of time.
Right.
You can do the best company in the world at that point.
Yeah.
It was just I mean, there's timing is a really big piece of this. Right?
Yeah.
Like, is that market mature? Like, is your product at that place and time fitting the need in the market of what the market needs, right?
Yeah.
And that's where that frictionless comes in, and where it is so easy. Like Tim, you're talking about, your earlier example, it's like people are struggling. Do you have the right product, right? Do you have the right messaging? But ultimately, do you have the right product that's going to fit that need and just feel like such a relief? And that's what will open the gates.
But there has to be a latent demand in a way of the product, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally.
There has to be a need, right? There has 100%. To be a need. And I do think that the value has to be viral, because I mean, that's what I love about Atlassian, right? If you can go public with no salespeople, I mean, Jay Simons and Carolyn over there did an amazing job.
Yeah. So Mesa, what do you think the fatal mistakes would be for a company to not exceed its market growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Tim kind of alluded to it earlier around some investments or kind of like misconception around product market fit. I think there are a lot of times when, as a leader or entrepreneur, things are going really well, you're really excited, but sometimes you don't know why, right?
Yeah, totally.
You don't know why you win, or you might not know really why you lose. And as we talk about predictable, repeatable growth, right? This is like a long haul. Like, growth isn't like in a week, or it's like you have to continue your success. It's almost like the why. I'm not going to say it like matters more than the growth of the revenue, but for you to build a sustainable business, you have to know, why are things working, right? Why are things not? And instead of just throwing spaghetti at the fridge and saying like, well, that's stuck, like you have to have, I think, more, Tim, you know this better than I do, but more discipline. The larger you scale, you have to have more discipline and know why things are working or why things aren't, to build on the foundation of learning. Otherwise, you're just
so easy to lose sight of that. It's so easy, when you go to 100 and 200 employees, to lose sight of, because you come up with new products every year to sell to existing customers and into new customers, but you lose sight of if you're not careful, you can lose sight of the why, the core why.
How do you get the answer to that question?
Melissa, do you want me to answer?
Well, I think discipline within the organization. One, I think, people talk a lot about culture, and I think culture is a huge way. Like, how do you work? It's really easy to say when you have a team of 30, like, this is what we're going to do, but you have a team of 100, a team of 200, it has to be ingrained in how people work. So kind of those rituals of hindsighting, of looking at the data, of having that discipline, like quarter over quarter, month over month, to also ask what's being learned, not just like, were we successful, but like, what did we learn? What do we use moving forward? And like, what do we need to change? So that's, my perspective, but actually, Tim, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I look at it as a series of, you're going to be data driven, and you need a combination of formal and informal vehicles. I always look at it like you have a series of operational frameworks within the company, right? You obviously have your QBRs, your kickoffs, your board meetings, and all these town halls and things that build an operational framework, but you need to have formal and informal mechanisms to connect, what we refer to all the time as connective tissue, to customers, to not just the senior people, to different level of people, that allows you to get formal and informal mechanisms and feedback into it. But again, we will come back to it over and over again. If you can build as much of this into the product as possible, and into your business model, that is, if it's delivered from the cloud, you can see the level of engagement, what they're looking at, how they're looking at, all these different things. Product really helps, but operational frameworks with formal and informal mechanisms, particularly as you go through these different growth stages, because you can't stay as close to some of these things as you have to. You have to empower and trust. Right?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, you have to make sure the data is quality. We help dozens of companies grow faster, and we realize that they are fairly disconnected from the market. The customer truth, they don't have it in their data or in their understanding of the customer, and that creates a huge issue. And I think part of it is because it's very hard to ask, if my baby is beautiful to somebody. Of course they're going to say, of course your baby is beautiful. It's hard for a company. So how do you get to good data? I mean, the data tells you the story, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the why.
I think like Tim was talking about qualitative and quantitative, right? So the data, I also think like when you look at market, right? So what are the things we're not including? What are the conversations that it has to do with, like the wider network of conversations, and trying to marry anecdotally, like, for us, a data point could be walking into other stores and asking them, like, asking a part-time associate, what are you using? What are you not? Why do you like it? Why do you not? Right? Kind of trying to fill out different types of data points to inform our view of the markets. But it has to do with like a broader database, and then being able to dive in and see not just what our customers are telling us, right? But what is the market saying? What are in the competitive set, like what does that look like? But the qualitative aspect too is just as important to us, because for us to make change within the company, we also need to storytell, right? Because you need to get that buy-in. You needed to say, like, yeah, it's one thing to say this is what the data says, but that's another thing to say, to share a video of like, a part-time working mom with 3 kids that works in retail at a minimum paying job, and say like, hey, with these 3 things, you could save me 4 hours a day and I could spend more time with my family. That's really, like the data carrying with the storytelling, I think has the most impact.
But that's the market truth. I mean, the market is speaking directly to you and telling you what the value is.
But that's not it. It's a one sample size, right? It's like that one voice. So.
True. Yes. Yeah. So I'm wondering if in your career, what has been the most difficult growth challenge that you successfully faced, and how did you address and overcome it? What was the most difficult growth challenge, and how did you address it?
I'm going to turn that to
difficult growth challenge. Hiring.
Interesting.
I think I think it's all about the team, and hiring is so difficult, particularly in a pandemic. And the world has changed, right? So it used to be, Silicon Valley, you put everybody in an office and you put them on a bus and do all the other stuff and give them food and stuff. Now it's changed. So I think hiring is the most difficult challenge. How we got around it? We formed centers of excellence. So for example, in Calgary, they have a great AI and ML school. So we opened up an office there. We invested in that during the pandemic. I think we have, I don't know how many people we have there, about 10 or 15 people, or something like that. So we started to look at that. Since there's all excellence around engineering things, we also, the thing that I've learned from my last company and this company in critical roles, and let's say you find a great candidate during business operations or financial operations, hire two, invest in the opportunity. Because the thing right now is you can't have, if you find two people doing, one person, let's say you have one headcount doing financial operations, and you narrowed it down to the last two, my advice would be hire both. Because if they're that good, they'll add more value to the company. And it takes you a long time to find somebody, and they leave or they just don't work out, you got too much operational risk on your growth trajectory on one particular person. So I did this at my last company, our first sales engineering people. We landed down to two. We hired them both. One left after 6 months. The other one stayed 5 years. In critical functions here, we'll hire two. We will not risk the investment opportunity in the market by narrowing down to one single headcount and saying that must be the right guy. That's too much risk, particularly in a pandemic hiring spree. If you narrowed it down to two, hire them both.
You're on mute.
I can't hear you, Philippe.
I'm sorry. I was saying it's hard to recruit. This is because, obviously there's a lot of competition, but is this because of the culture fit? Is this because of the skill set? Is this because people are not rallying behind your cause, or they're not excited about what you're doing?
Well, at least in cybersecurity, CrowdStrike has got a $40 billion market cap. I think there's, 2,500 cybersecurity companies, and everybody claims that they can solve world peace, cancer, and AIDS by lunch. So
right.
Your differentiation is important, but I just think there's a general fight for talent in engineering talent and sales talent and across the board right now.
Yeah.
Melissa, you finding the same thing?
Oh yeah, totally, absolutely. And Tim, I think like your advice around hiring too, that's great advice, right? I think, also thanks for taking the lead on this question, and thinking through growth challenge, it really does come down to people, right? Like and I think when we think about, like Philippe, the number of people that we're hiring, it's hard to hire. Like we've tripled the size of the company in the past, almost a year plus, right? And it's hard to find talent that quickly to put into place in the onboarding. And I think when I think about our growth challenge, it is actually really around how does the company continue to have the culture it does and the operational standards, right? And have the origin of the company be felt by the first employee to the last, to the most recently hired. And for us, what's interesting is we've always been a distributed company, right? We're based in the Bay Area. We actually don't have a physical office. So COVID, it's interesting, right? So before it was cool, you guys.
So you mean you never had an office since the beginning?
We've never had an office.
That's
Good
amazing.
for you.
That's amazing.
So the business.
I presume you don't want mine.
I definitely don't. Yeah, I know. This would be a good time to get a steal. The operational foundation that we've laid into place in terms of knowledge sharing, accountability, team building, et cetera, it is very different and unique. And but it is also harder to maintain when you have a lot of people coming from non-remote first environments. That change management is hard. It's hard on the culture as well. And so, one of the things that we did at Zipline is that we actually promoted someone who was in a customer success, change management role. We promoted her internally to head remote enablement for us, right? Because we've been distributed from the start. We will always be distributed. It's a key hire for us. And to make sure that everyone in the organization with our fast growth trajectory is on the same page about how are we communicating. Like Tim, I'm sure the past year, it's been a circus, right? Maybe not as much for you because your core customer isn't retail, right?
Yeah.
But we've had a lot of change. There are a lot of social unrest, companies' obligation to employees. It's changed in the past 5 years, and a lot more responsibility has been placed on work to take care of employees' mental and physical health as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And so,
what does your person remote enablement report up to? Does it report onto you directly, or interesting?
Me, although I am looking for a head of people. So if anyone has SaaS experience
Yeah, we are too.
in vertical, please reach out to me. It's Melissa at zipline.inc.com.
Yeah.
So zipline.inc, sorry. Yeah, but that person will then report into the head of people. And the reason, Tim, is it's so hard to find a head of people that is both remote savvy and enabled and can like look at new ways of doing business and operationalize things, as well as knows like termination processes or salary or like the more traditional, like, internationalization for contractors. So to have those two competencies together is the strongest for our organization.
Yeah, it becomes a very creative job in a way that ways that never existed before. There's no questions. Yeah. So now, if you look back, is there one thing that you would have done that you would do differently in order to grow the business faster? If you look at your past experience, what were the mistakes? What would you do differently?
I'm going to take one from Tim's book, but at the beginning of COVID, we totally slowed the business, right? Our core customers, our retailers, they were feeling a lot of impact. And so we basically halted. We were on kind of like standstill for a while. We didn't expect to see the volume of growth we did through COVID, because then retailers started to pick up. They knew they needed to roll out more technologies. They knew they needed to change their operating process, and were fundamental for them doing that, because retailers are running a lot off of pen and paper. They're like sending like a 14-page, PDF to stores and trying to run their business in that way. And they realized they couldn't be as agile as they needed or communicate COVID stuff, et cetera, in a localized way by running their business off of that. So when Tim talks about hiring, we were behind. We, I guess, didn't anticipate that well enough. And we have just now today finally caught up with that. But that transition really hurt because it really stretched the team. And that's a learning on my end, like hire, hire faster. And Tim, to your point, maybe hire two.
Yeah. But the slowdown was more because of the pandemic and the impact on the retail industry, right? It wasn't something that you did wrong or you could have, or you would have done differently, apart from hiring area, which you pointed out. But
the growth, our growth is like based off of bandwidth, right?
I see.
Having the sales conversations, having the people to staff the accounts, to do the implementations. People are a bottleneck. So if you don't have enough people, you don't have a good way to process the growth. And
it's a capacity issue.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Tim?
I'll give you two. One is kind of technology orientated. 6-7 years ago, we didn't have enough eyes on the peripheral vision around the growth of VMware, not in the hypervisor market, the virtualization market, but in the SDN market. Mm-hmm. We thought Cisco was going to hold onto the data center longer than it did. And then when Mario Prem and Luca and Sony were left, there was, VMware went from 150K a quarter in the SDN platform to now I think it's like $1.5 billion a quarter. And we did not, we had to make some strategic and emotional and everything shifts around that. And that goes back to this, like, transitions that you have to be really have hardcore, deliberate peripheral vision and be relentless on that. And then I'll give you a much more simple one that, truthfully, I was surprised how effective this person's been. We obviously have enterprise sales teams all around the world, blah, 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 and channels, all that kind of stuff. We hired too late sales enablement. And our sales enablement person, I interviewed this lady. She was so far above the second person I was interviewed of. I'm like, you're joining the company. I don't care what it costs.
Right. I don't care what you do.
Yeah, I mean, but she has added so much value. And if I had her a year ago, that's one of those functions I don't know. I had a bit of a blind spot on, if I was really honest. And when you find somebody's doing it so damn well, you're like, I want one of those. And I should have had one of those ages ago. That would have accelerated so much opportunity for us.
Yeah, I think that's a very key point. We see two things all the time, sales enablement, lack of capacity, and then the other one, which is a whole discussion we could have one other day. It's about pricing optimization. But yeah, that's true. Now, if anybody who is listening or watching has any question, you can type it in the chat, and then happy to ask the panelist. The other question I want to ask you is that if you look at your competitor's playbook, growth playbook, are there any pages in that book that you would like to take and you look at it and say, oh boy, they did that right, we should do it this way as well? Is there anything they're doing better than you in a way in terms of growth?
Yeah, I think some of them, we have a variety of competitors, right? We have ankle biters, and we have giant companies that are in the way of our success, and many in between. I think I don't think they do. They're great companies, and there's a massive market that we're all going to win. So that's wonderful. I see them having weaknesses that we exploit. One particular company, I won't say the name of the company, the CEO has a horrible reputation at customers, like a horrible reputation. I can quote you like 5 customers or maybe 10 customers that actually specifically volunteer how much they dislike that person, which I've never even heard before. It's crazy.
Who was that team? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think look, I'll let Melissa answer, but in my world, I do admire some of our competitors. And some of the companies that don't compete with us, but they're in adjacent space. So like Datadog, I admire the hell out of Datadog.
But is there a specific thing that they do in terms of growth that you're saying this is a really good idea? We should do the same.
Their product, the simplicity of the product, the price point that they sell, the organic value of how they sell it, the viral value, across customers, in addition to organic value within the customer, how they share things across it. We don't compete with them, but we admire the hell out of them, and they are a direct kind of like adjacent to us.
I see.
I think for me, one of the things that we've always wrestled with is, in our messaging, we don't go far over our skis, right? We do what we deliver, we market what we deliver. Like, we're very, I guess, like honest, I guess you could say, in doing business. And when I look at like, and
you're in Silicon Valley company, I don't get it.
But I came from retail, so it's like that's where it's like I came to solve. I was like a buyer, right? So right. I think in that way, when I think of one competitor in particular, they really go over their skis in terms of their marketing message and how they show up, but they're not able to deliver from a product perspective. And so that's always a conversation for us, like how far over our skis should we be going? Should we be pushing ourselves? And so I wouldn't say that's, I would take a page from their book in that sense, because I think that they overpromise too much, but I think that we can push ourselves to go farther than what we have done historically in the past.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. It's like a VC pitch. If you pitch to me as a CEO, on one level, you need to sell me the vision and the grandiosity of it, and like you're gonna make the planet spin the other way. And at the same time, you need to show me the 3 first steps you're gonna take to get there. I can link in between, but I need both. And in a way, I think what you're saying is the same for your business, where you need to have some kind of a vision and excitement and a point of view, which they have to subscribe to, and then at the same time you have to be very clear in exactly what you're delivering today. Right. So as Yvonne mentioned earlier, I wrote a book that was just published on growth, which is called Aligning the Dots. In the book, I talk about something that I've seen in Silicon Valley, which is a push from the investment community and the PE firms and the VC firms to grow too fast and too quickly. And I always think of growth, like wine, you can drink it, but it has to be a reasonable, growth. So do you have any comments on this? And have you observed any circumstances where achieving, high growth was actually not desirable and it had negative effects on the business?
Melissa, you want to answer that one, or you want me to go? You go.
I go. So, I think one, it's just like critical to get investors on your board that have the same values that you do around your business. Like we had multiple term sheets in our fundraisers, and the person and their understanding of your business is just key to have that alignment. When I think about, the hardest decisions that we've had to make are around, we serve like very large enterprises. Like, do we do something like custom for that one, right? Or like embed into that or not, if it's like a very large contract. And, we've been able to take a step back and say, like, what are you looking to solve for? Let's talk about the job to be done versus this specific, like dingle dongle XYZ, and had to work a way around it. But you cannot sacrifice the effectiveness of your product just for like one thing. I think you have to find a better way for like one company, even if it is at a high growth, you have to find a way to either like do it in a more creative way or really dive deep from a product perspective to say, like, what are you trying to achieve? Let's talk through and partner on this together versus just saying yes. So
that's really, really hard. I mean, I get the theory, but
look at you.
If you have a customer who says, well, I give you $3 million every year for the next 5 years, but I want, X, Y, Z, and Y, navigating those water where you try to steer that customer to a more common product is really hard. And I don't have an answer. I don't have a good answer, but it's a tough equation to solve.
Yeah, the tech debt gets really tricky.
Yes. Yeah, especially if this technology challenges that the team is good. You say, oh yeah, we can do that, and yeah, it's not easy, but we can get there. And it may be hurting the business actually.
Yeah. I know. I look at the investor. I agree with Melissa that the straight point here is you got to get your investors that are aligned with you, right?
Sure.
I've seen companies. I've been in companies that we've raised a lot of money at a very high valuation. I think that's dangerous. I think what's also dangerous is where people, and this may be controversial, but where people do a secondary and the founding team or the leading team or the CEO team are separated from the average employee.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that at all. I think if you're going to do a secondary, it should be open to everybody equally, not just to the leadership team. So I was offered a secondary at my last company, and I absolutely refused anybody to take it. Because I wanted to be aligned with the employees. I think one of the best, and basically the only reason why I do this stuff is because the journey is the reward, and I want to bring as many people on the journey with it, and then have as much fun and make it rewarding for everybody. Yeah. So I think you stay away from investors that go crazy, stupid valuations that just want you to put money in and grow. You want to do growth the right way based on the market and the product, and the growth, but also avoid things that disconnect you from your employees, because I think those are the most important people that you have on the journey with you.
Yeah, you introduce misalignment, and at some point you pay the price for it.
Totally.
So how do you know what the right growth rate is for the business? I mean, let's say you have a market that's growing at 57% a year, and you want to beat that market, but where do you put the cursor? Where do you say, okay, I can go 1.4 times that growth rate, but I cannot grow twice as fast? And is the growth rate, in fact, limited by your capacity to hire and your capacity to have the right people, which is what you said earlier, or are there other factors as well?
We do what we refer to as right to left planning. So we do this, once a year, and then we have a review mid-year. So we say, where's the market going to be in 3 years' time? Where's Amazon? Where's Azure? Where's all these big guys going to be in 3 years' time? And we do that every February, and we touch base every August on the same model. And then we go, what products do we have? What's our model? What's our financial model? And then we go back to where we are today, and we review that all the time. Right to left planning is something everybody at Viama knows. Everybody knows the right to left planning model. Otherwise, you're building things that are incremental, and this incrementalism means that you miss out on market shares. It means you miss out on investment areas that are strategic that may take a longer time to invest. So we map. The answer to your question is we map everything, including the market size, product size, segment, revenue opportunities, target net retention rates, everything to our 3-year plan, and then we hold ourselves to that. And if it goes quicker, we have the review mechanism that we invest in the opportunity slightly faster. That's how we map our whole business.
So you understand and you have the context of the market that dictates your growth rate. What about you, Melissa?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually curious, Tim, to hear about your mapping. So I might reach out to you after.
Sure.
But what's interesting is that retail's gone through so much change in the past year, right? And so what we've been doing is essentially looking at the market in terms of like breaking retail down or physical locations down into different segments, looking at, I think what we're trying to measure but aren't quite sure of is what % of retailers are buying or will be buying technology like ours, right? Because then you're measured based off of that %.
Yeah.
And that's where with the flux in the market, there's a little bit more of a question mark because things have changed so much over the past 2 years, but we would gauge our success based off of those metrics, right? Like how many people out there like our addressable market, but also are looking for technologies like ours, and what's our ownership in those in the different categories.
Yeah, the other thing we map towards as you go through the right to left planning is someone's going to lose, right?
Yeah.
When you get to 50, 60, 70, 100, 150 million ARR, where do you suck value and money out of, and why is your domain permission against it?
Yeah.
Stronger than the incumbent.
I think we're coming to a close in the next 5 minutes. I want to ask you, for anyone listening and caring about growth, is there a wise piece of advice you could share with us to grow a business?
All right, Melissa, over to you.
Oh, really? I was looking at you.
Let me find a coin. I can do that with a coin.
I mean, I do have something that I often say, like, I think growth is just as much about tenacity, right? And resilience. I always say that the path, I took it actually from a leader in my past, but the path to heaven is never a straight line, right? So you're always going up, but it's a little bit bumpy along the way, right? And so that's how I always think about growth for me. It's like never totally linear. And you have to figure it out at every step. Every step it's a little bit different. You have to communicate differently. You have to lead differently. You have to product plan, look at the market differently. And so I think that's where the kind of resilience and just tenacity comes into play. Yeah,
not a straight line. Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, no, we always say success is not a straight line. So you're that's where we live it. But I would go to your hope is not a strategy. And I would avoid incrementalism in product. I would avoid incrementalism across the whole business model. And I would very much lean on right to left planning on that, because if you can look at that, it also gives you a lot of. It's just really good thinking if it's done right, and it helps you raise money. If you want to raise money, it helps you talk about the business model in the market context, and also helps you lead your employees as well as lead your customers.
Yeah. I got an interesting question from Mike. He says, I've seen numerous cases where employees in high growth get left behind in their perception of what the company is today versus when they originally joined. How do you counter that? Which I think is an interesting question.
I've seen numerous cases where employees in high growth get left behind in their perception of where the company is today versus,
communication.
Yeah. Melissa, do you have a first stab, or do you want me to have a go?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of, definitely, I understand that question. For us, we've had to change how we communicate, right? More frequently is better, especially for our distributed teams, right? So a lot more intentionality, a lot more touch points, and a lot more putting a flag in the sand, this has changed, or we're broadening the vision, right? And just being intentional around kind of like where the company, laying the context of where the company has been to where it's going has been key for us.
But so over communicating, because sometimes we tell employees something and we said, well, I told them last Friday, they obviously know, but you realize you have to tell them, 3 times until it starts to sink.
Yeah, I also think you have to be very careful. Like, it does take a long time to get these companies to the real growth. It could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And you got to avoid things like calling people old timers or treating them differently because they were here since the beginning. And I think the communication and the culture is key, but embracing everybody equally is absolutely critical. I mean,
Okay.
I've had people in our company that's been here 8 years, and I've had people in here that's been here 8 days.
Mhm.
And, while you appreciate the loyalty and you need to bring everybody with you, got to be real careful on how you communicate, and just model it well.
Yeah. Well, Tim and Miss, I want to thank you so much. It's been a great panel, great wisdom, great thoughts, and I hope everybody will take into account your pieces of advice and your experience. And thank you so much again for being on the panel.
Lots of fun. Lots of fun.
And I echo that. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I really like how Melissa ended it, and Tim, you kind of said the same. Growth and success are never linear. So I really, I think that's a great summary of today's discussion. And thank you. I appreciate all your input, and we'll see you again soon. Everyone else, thanks for joining us today as well, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.